I'm Brice Futch,
I'm Spencer Amaral.
and this is The Way Forward. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Way Forward podcast. This is your host, Brice Futch. Starting off with a little housekeeping, we have some exciting news. The Way Forward podcast is now an official podcast of Stand for Georgia Values Foundation. Stand for Georgia Values Foundation is a 501c3 based out of here in North Georgia. We focus on pro-family, pro-business, pro-public safety policy. And we also have a leadership training network. We've trained and equipped young conservatives for work across the state. We have 8 graduates of our program, 9 that are currently in the program for this year. We're working on recruiting another 20 for our program in 2026. So if you have a young conservative in your life that is looking to do future work here in the state, we would love to connect with them. Please send them our way. Find us on Facebook and on the socials. You can go find the podcast at The Way Forward with Brice Futch. The Stand for Georgia Values, we have both the foundation and we have a C4 as well. You can find both of those on the Book of Faces. And we look forward to staying connected with you that way. But we are still a production of Futch Communications as well. So welcome to the program. We're excited for this new venture and this new relationship. For those of you who've been listening for a while, you know Stand for Georgia Values has been a sponsor of the program for a long time, and that will continue. Now, hopefully in perpetuity, as we try and build something great here in North Georgia. So, as always, here with Spencer Amaral, today we're celebrating a beautiful fall morning. It's probably 60 degrees out around the front porch, both in Shaw-collared cardigans, as one should expect.
That's right.
Enjoying a good cigar.
Good morning, Brice.
It's great to be back with you.
Same.
So today we're going to take a slightly different tack and talk a little bit about religious liberty and religious freedom and religious plurality. And what does religious pluralism look like? Should it look like? How did our founders understand it? And how does this play out? This conversation was sparked by the Hindu festival Diwali, which was yesterday at the time of this recording. And there was a celebration in the Oval Office of that holiday. And a lot of us were very frustrated by that exhibition, partly because we don't see Hinduism as a genuine religion, right? So when we talk about genuine religion, at least when I talk about it, Spencer, you can define the term for yourself. When I think genuine religion, we look at what religion is following the God of the Bible. And so I would say it's really a denominational diversity, a denominational pluralism, as opposed to a truly religious pluralism. Kind of the conversation that set the tone for this conversation was we were reviewing the old story about British colonialism in India, when the British commander comes up to the Hindu priest who's about to light this funeral pyre to burn a widow on her husband's funeral pyre, which was the custom at the time. And the British commander was trying to stop the ceremony, and the priest said, well, this is what we do in our country. And the British commander said, well, we hang people who do this in my country. And so the idea that all religions are equal is just simply not true. One other quick context piece before we dive into it. There's a great author, Ayan Hirsi Ali. She was born and raised in a fundamental Islamic home. She later converted to Christianity. She lived in the Netherlands. She was a member of the Dutch Parliament. Now she resides in the U.S. And she talked in her book, Heretic, about Islam needing a reformation, similar to the reformation that was found within Christianity. The pushback to that at the time was the Reformation in Christianity was a call back to originalism. It was a religion that had lost its way in a lot of its practices, and it needed to return to its first principles. Islam, however, with the Reformation within Islam, is a call back to violence, right? Muhammad was a warlord. That was his position. Just about any version of the Quran that you read, and there are multiple versions, multiple translations, call on true followers of Muhammad to be jihadist, to practice violence. It is an inherently a violent religion. And so Reformation within that religion would be a call back to those first principles, as opposed to a liberalization, which is what she was arguing for at the time. So when we look at all of this, we look at our modern context on religious pluralism, and we think, okay, well, the First Amendment has to apply to all religions anywhere and everywhere, right?
I love that as you were talking about the nonviolence of religion.
Yeah,
jump straight to the Second
Well,
Amendment.
because the Second Amendment is what allows you to keep the first, right? They inherently go together. And it's really important with that because that's not how our founders understood religious pluralism, right? The context in which they were writing the Constitution was one of denominational pluralism, right?
That is their context.
It was Protestant versus Catholic. It was Dutch Reformed versus Quaker. It was Anglican versus everybody else. And so that was the context in which they were writing. And I would argue that's the context in which we should view this amendment, this law. So all of that for context for the conversation. Spencer, let's jump off here. What are your thoughts?
Oh, which point do you want to start with specifically?
Up to you. Dealer's choice. You can direct us where we go from here.
Well, I do love that story of that British general, Sir Charles Napier.
And for the record, you Googled that. That was not on the tip.
I'm just providing a couple more details.
I appreciate the added context. I just wanted our listeners to know that you were not that you didn't outclass me that well on your.
Well, I should have remembered it because I was somewhere a couple weeks ago and a guy quoted that story.
I thought you were going to say you were at Hillsdale because we just had to make sure that I got worked into this conversation. Anyway, sorry, continue, please.
That's a great story. And of course, the humor of that story originally comes from the fact that the way he phrases it, it's a written injunction, right? And it's issued to these Hindu priests. And he says, oh, okay, I hear you. You've got this custom of your people that, you burn widows. Okay, well, let me tell you about my people. My nation also has a custom. When men burn women alive, we hang them and we confiscate all their property. So let us all act according to national customs. And it's a good... such an English way
absolutely
of kind of poking at the breakdown of this multicultural approach, as if everybody can just kind of do their own thing their own way, and this will never run contrary to anybody's interest.
That's right.
It's like eventually you have to figure out how to live with the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to inevitably butt heads and step on toes.
Right.
So anyway, so I love that you want to talk about religious pluralism. I remember one of the first books I read on this, I think it was my first trip to Washington, D.C. as I was somewhere in high school. And I went to the gift shop under the Capitol, and they had a book on religious pluralism. And as a new Christian at the time, I was really interested in the subject. And I picked it up, and I've been studying the subject ever since. What you see across the founding generation is there's a wide mix of religions there, but something that is built into our form of government, and this is undeniable. I mean, we're a nation that's we're a jumping off of English common law and all that English heritage that we have, legally speaking, but we're also, the experimental part of the American Revolution was the more Lockean approach, right? And Locke, as the big liberal in the room at the time, he's big on, separation of church and state, and yet at the same time, even John Locke said, well, you can't allow atheists in your society because, A, you can't trust them. It actually meant something at the time when you had a newly elected president and he's got to put his hand on the Bible and swear to uphold the duties that are being given to him. We expect that man to take it seriously when he makes that oath on the Bible. And it's understood that this will be, he'll be held accountable, right, to uphold
to a shared standard.
Yeah, and so even Locke is like, you can't take the oath of an atheist seriously. In fact, he wouldn't even put his hand on the Bible and make this oath. So that meant a lot to John Locke at the time. And at the same time, John Locke also said, and by the way, you can't allow Roman Catholics in your society.
Which is part.
Because they have this dual loyalty to the Pope.
That's right.
And there's this
age-old argument.
But I mean, they're living in the aftermath of the Reformation.
That's right.
So you could cut the tension between Protestants and Catholics with a knife.
Oh, for sure. And they cut each other with knives for a long time, right?
And luckily, we've moved beyond that.
Yes.
Wonderfully so. And we all continue to pray for the greater unity of the church. But what you get in America is this really interesting hodgepodge. If there's a bunch of different types of Christians here, and yes, there are Jews.
That's right.
There are Roman Catholics, nonetheless, in the mix. But there's this understanding that if you want to build a sustainable system, there have to be clear principles that guide it. In the same way that Napier is pointing out, look, in this whole colonial process experiment, you're going to have these parallel, civilizations living across the street from each other. And you've got your custom of burning widows, and we've got our custom of hanging the men that do that. So when push comes to shove, what do you do here? Realistically, you have to find a way forward for everybody so that there's one set of rules that you're actually living by. It's trickier, right, to do in reality than it sounds on paper. But the American expression of this was not, the American founding fathers also oftentimes get categorized as being anti-organized religion. And that's not at all the case. They also get accused of being deists across the board.
Yeah.
And that's not fair or accurate.
They were
There were a
either all
couple.
deists or they were Thomas Jefferson who just cut the Bible up to say what they wanted it to say. And you're exactly right. That was not accurate at all.
Well, there were a couple legitimate, consistent deists,
Well, and even then,
like
sorry,
Ethan Allen,
sure,
right?
Ethan Allen was a
Thomas Paine.
Ben Franklin, but even Franklin, towards the end of his life, continued to move from that hands-off view of God that deists have to the more. I think he said, the older I get, the more I realize the hand of God in the events of men. Right?
The minute you start talking about the hand of God, you're no longer a deist.
Exactly.
And so even if there's only this generic, like we're talking about some kind of being up there who's overseeing, the events of this world, who will be a judge of some sort at the end, which is why the oaths that we make on the Bible matter, because we believe there will be accountability, right? None of that matches up with deism. So the way you read any of the founding fathers and the way they talk about this new order that they're building in the United States, they're not deists consistently. But there's a big tent in terms of what they are. And you could say that, there's a huge chunk of them that are not exactly Orthodox Christians either.
That's right.
And that's fair as well. And there's always this danger for political movements to seize upon the aspects or the elements of the religion around them, whatever's in their context, when it is convenient and self-serving.
Absolutely.
And it's my job as a man of the church to make sure that the faith is not hijacked in that way, to the abuse of, the teachings of Scripture. And then you just set, people up to say, oh, look at these guys, they call themselves Christians and they're doing all this stuff over here. And it's like, yeah, well, if you really read the Bible or you understood this deeply, you'd realize how these guys are completely hijacking something that's not their own to serve their own political interests. So we don't want to see that either in the American form of government. But to be fair to the founding fathers, their hands-off approach really comes from a desire to see less of that bloodshed that we referenced. Like they come from the era of Protestants and Catholics killing each other. They said, wouldn't it be great if we saw less of that?
That's right.
They also looked in the rearview mirror and they saw the English Civil Wars and they saw what happened when the Presbyterians and the Baptists ganged up on the Anglicans and took out the king and killed him. Because we were fighting over who was going to have their hands on the levers of power. And one of us had to win and the rest were going to lose. And so the founding fathers in America said, let's try to avoid that by saying the federal government's not going to have a lever over what religion everyone else has to be. But they also knew, like, we have to have a common set of rules for everyone to play by.
That's right.
So how do you create a broad system of order that accommodates all the people that you do have, while at the same time actually unifying us and giving us a way to live together in peace and harmony? And the Constitution, Bill of Rights, a beautiful statement of that attempt. But that's the project. They're not trying to weed religion out of the American consciousness.
Oh, absolutely not.
In fact, they're building on it in order to create a basis of moral order and justice in society.
That's absolutely right. I mean, even Jefferson, who, like we said a minute ago, had some serious problems with Scripture. When he was president, he rented out, or loaned out rather, I believe it was a loan. I don't think anybody paid anything for it, but he loaned out the center of the Capitol building for church services on Sunday. Like there's always been a tie between religion and our government. Now, our government has never had an official religion, nor should it. And that's a little bit of a difference between the Christian nationalist movement and kind of what we're talking about here today is we want to see Christians involved in every level of government. And we want to see a government that promotes the true, the good, and the beautiful. But we do not believe that the government should have an official religion that's forced on the population as a whole. But we do have to have that cultural understanding, right? So, let's pick say back when Davy Crockett was running for Congress in Tennessee, he could go to a meeting and talk about the story of Job, right? And everybody in the crowd, 9 out of 10 people in the crowd would know exactly who he's talking about. They would be able to reference the same story. They would understand the underlying principles that were there. John Adams famously said that our society, our nation was meant for a Christian people, and that our Constitution was totally inadequate for the governance of any other. There is a Christian pluralism.
And why is that?
Because of that moral guidance, right? That consistent moral line of this is what is acceptable, this is what's not. And we saw that with the Mormons, right? The Mormons were kicked out of society and sent to Utah because Joseph Smith was promoting a religion that was antithetical to Christianity.
Yeah, but there's an even stronger link. And I think this is important for us to claim. And you don't, sometimes we don't say this because it might sound, I don't know, like we're beating our chest or something. But there's such a beautiful link between liberty, as it has been
Oh,
sought
yeah,
after and
absolutely.
achieved in the West,
Yep.
and this Judeo-Christian biblical foundation we've inherited as
Mhm.
Westerners, right? It's not a coincidence. And so I mean, this morning in the lectionary readings, we were reading through James, and James references, this line that you find in Scripture, especially in the letters of Paul. But he talks about the law of liberty
Mhm.
that Christians have, and the whole point of this is that it's not about everybody, tripping over themselves for the rest of their life to technically parse things out and slice and dice and make sure that you're technically doing all the right things, following the rules. Like,
That's right.
that's the Pharisaism that Jesus spoke against.
Mhm.
And the Christian church from the very beginning said, look, loosen up, people. What are we really doing here? We're here to lead a life of love
Mhm.
towards God and towards the creation and our fellow man. And if you're acting in the Spirit, it's really not about, fulfilling all these little boxes that you have to tick every day. It's about embracing the freedom for which Christ has set you free and walking in the Spirit.
Mhm.
And every parent knows freedom's a delicate thing. It requires responsibility. You leave your kids at home in the name of freedom with no oversight. What do you expect is going to happen? Well, it depends on how mature and responsible your kids are. If they can handle freedom
That's right.
well, then your home will be well ordered when you return. If your kids don't handle freedom very well, the
Yeah.
house won't be there when you return,
Right.
right? And the kids might not be there either.
Mhm.
And so that's just the realism that we have to be cognizant of.
Yeah.
So for Christians, the understanding that walking in the Spirit is for our good.
Mhm.
Obviously, it sets us free from, the sin in our life
Right.
and the brokenness and the pain of the world around us. And it frees us up to do that which we were meant to do
That's
all
right.
along.
That's right.
Live a truly human life
Yep.
of flourishing and
Yeah.
honoring God.
Yeah. I really appreciate you said true human life, right? Herman Bavinck said that the death of Christ on the cross was not to make us less human, but to make us more fully human, right?
Exactly.
To be fallen is not human. To err is to be fallen. To err is not to be human, right?
That is liberty.
Right, and liberty is Colson used to say this all the time. Liberty is the
The
freedom.
human part.
That's right.
Yeah.
Freedom is the ability. Liberty is the freedom to do what you ought, not to do what you want. Right, which is a callback to Lewis and the men without chests. Right, the fact that if you don't have that moral, ethical understanding in whether it's a societal understanding or actual formation from scripture or formation from society, if you don't have that moral ethical foundation, then your reason, your head, it exists only to get what your gut, your base desires want, right? And that's where we see this explosion in violence, explosion in people taking advantage of other people and scams and just all of this just sin and muck and just wastefulness. And we see that every day here, right? We every time there's a shooting somewhere, we think, oh my gosh, like is there no virtue left, right? And we struggle as a society to make sense of a lot of these things because we've lost that underpinning of our theological formation, right? Cultural Christianity, we desire true Christianity in every person, right? We want to see them come to a saving knowledge of Christ. We want to see them submit to him as king in their life and all of those things. And you should appreciate that because that's from the book that we did for our I'm not a huge
our book study book.
Yeah. I'm not a big, what do you call that theological idea? MacArthur was known for it.
I don't want to say the wrong thing.
No, it's fine. You can guess, and I'll tell you if we're close.
Describe it again.
John MacArthur was big on it. Kingdom salvation, right?
Oh yeah, lordship salvation.
Lordship salvation. There it is. Yeah. I'm not a huge lordship salvation guy, so that comment was a stretch for me. Anyway,
you're not big on proclaiming Christ as Lord.
Well, I am, but yeah, there's the longer conversation there. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Cultural Christianity is still a good, right? It is still a common good for people. It's a common grace thing, right? It's the rain falls on the just and the unjust, and having a society that's formed around that true idea of liberty and freedom is good for everyone.
Which requires a very strong moral compass.
Absolutely.
It requires a very strong awareness of virtue and vice and the difference between them.
Mm-hmm.
An ability to perceive a vice even when it's cloaked in everything that is good
and
self-serving. So all of that, because you mentioned the John Adams quote,
Mm-hmm.
where he talks about this only works for a moral and religious people. And that's not in some like Pharisaical sense. It's because he's making a claim. He's saying, I actually would put my money down on a bet that this would work here
Mm-hmm.
because we have a moral
That's right.
and religious people. They can handle the responsibility that comes with freedom
That's right.
because we believe that the freedom we give to American people in this time and place will be used for liberty.
Mm-hmm. There's a similar quote there. I'm trying to remember the whole thing. I know Colson talked about it. I don't remember if it was original to him or somebody else, but the idea that you have that policeman in your heart, of your conscience, and because of that religious formation. And if you don't have it, you can never have enough policemen in society for the society to flourish, right? You have to have that individual ethic that plays out in the common square.
Right. Which is why, the only way to make sense of humanity not already doing the self-destruct thing,
Right.
like clearly the Holy Spirit is at work
Yes.
in the hearts of man,
Right.
saving us from ourselves 7 days a week.
Absolutely. And society tries to paint Christianity as this oppressive, handmaid's tale religion. And it's nothing can be further from the truth, right? Tom Holland, not the actor, but the I think he was an anthropologist. I think he's converted to Christianity now. Before, when he wrote his book, he was not a Christian yet, but he was doing a study of human rights throughout history. And he credited in that book, again, as a non-believer, he credited Christianity with the single factor that brought women's rights into effect, right? In Rome, even in Judaism, the pre-Christ, women's rights were not really a thing, especially in Greece and in Rome. And as Christianity spread, so did human rights, because we view every single person as being made in the image of God, right? There is that inherent worth and dignity that they have. And we also have this cultural idea that, government can be non-religious, and that's not true, right? Humans in the West, we forget in our context, in our Western context, humans are inherently spiritual beings, and we are going to worship something, right? Whether it's ourselves or some cause that we believe in or the God of the Bible, right? We are going to pick something and we are going to worship it. And so the idea that government can be non-religious is impossible. In the religion that we have replaced it with is secularism, and this postmodern mindset, now a post-Christian mindset, that you can be anything you want to be, you can do anything you want to do, and your self-satisfaction is the best and highest good, right? And it's a morally bankrupt system, and it has led to, John Stonestreet says this all the time, ideas have consequences, bad ideas have victims. These ideas have led to millions of victims across our nation in the last 150 years.
If there was ever a way, and secularism looked like it was working for a while, right? And that's true within a broadly homogenous society where you're basically talking about the differences between Christian denominations.
Right.
We call it secularism, but it wasn't really that. It was more of a shared public space where people weren't killing each other over the levers of power.
Yeah.
Or doing conversion at the edge of the sword, but rather coming together in a charitable and civil and peaceful way, right? To pursue truth, but like truth with a capital T, that's really where it all comes down, where the rubber meets the road. Are we abiding by principles of truth in our society or not? And in a certain sense, that's not a black and white thing. You're talking about what people truly believe in. You're talking about articles of faith.
Right.
The article of faith of, is it good and just and honoring to the gods that be to burn my widow on my funeral pyre? Or is it good and just and honoring to God to not burn my widow, right? Or even to hang people who do so?
In that's so antithetical to Christian thought, right? Because what does Christ say is true religion? To care for the widow and the orphan.
By burning them.
Right?
Right.
It's staggering, the differentiation here. And you talk about secularism looking good for a while. It did because the rest of society had that moral formation, right? So the fruit of capital T truth divorced from religion is lower T truth that's permeating society, right?
Right.
And it sounds good when you're the academic and you're saying, well, I can look back on natural law and I don't need I don't need religion. I don't need scripture. I don't need any of these things that have historically undergirded these pieces. I am my own man, right? I am man. Hear me roar. Here's my reasoning and why all of this makes sense.
That was the modern project in its later stage.
That's right.
Right. It really got there. And they thought you could get to the truth, capital T, even apart from religion, from faith, from articles of belief. And you really can't, because what postmodernity has revealed or pointed out fairly is the extent to which someone could come along and just, deconstruct all of this as mere social
That's right.
constructions, right? Impositions of one guy's opinions through the levers of power on everybody else. And even moral claims, as many of the postmodern thinkers say, are, really just a form of moral tyranny and bullying, using morality as a club against other people by imposing your rules on them. And the real question at the end of the day is like, well, but is it true or not?
Absolutely.
And if you fall into the pit of despair and be like, well, we'll never know what is true, it's going to lead to such a dramatic breakdown where the only options before you then are anarchy, or you just play this really dark, cynical game where like, okay, granted, we're all just playing make-believe. We build the world in our own image the way we want it to be. It's a naked power game. Yeah, that's all that's going on.
And it's all based off pride, right? It's all based off pride. It's, I'm sufficient. I can figure this out. I don't need anybody's help.
Right. That and, as Nietzsche said, the will to power.
That's right. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think this has been great. I think this is something we could talk about for a lot longer. And I think as we see this continuation in, this movement within Christianity in America, this kind of revives patriotism and nationalism, I think this idea of religious pluralism is going to really play an integral role of how we handle that and who we look to as our leaders. Because historically, and I won't take too long on this, but historically there's been a view that, pre Donald Trump, the view was we need a president who is a Christian, right? How they define Christian isn't a big deal, but there is a form of a religious test, right? It's not formal in the Constitution. It's cultural. We want somebody that claims Christ. Well, then you look at the effectiveness of the Bush administration and you compare that to the effectiveness of the Trump administration, and there is no comparison, right? We have a president today who's done more for the pro-life movement, who's done more for families, who's done more for our country than we've seen since Ronald Reagan, right? And he is not a Christian, right? He's a moral man. I think he has a moral, ethical code that he follows. I would disagree with some of it, as many people would, but his effectiveness in the job is...
He says he's Presbyterian.
That's right.
For the record.
He does. But he also says, I don't know if I'm going to get to heaven. Recently, he said that.
If you wrote a book on spirituality, I wouldn't buy it. Right.
Right. And nobody expects him to be, right? Because nobody expects him to fill that mantle,
right.
Carry that mantle. Right. And so how do we as Christians find leaders who understand the political levers of power, who understand how to be effective like a President Trump has been effective, while still holding to these first principles and these first truths, right?
Yes.
I think that's going to be essential for this movement moving forward. But yeah, it's just, this is fascinating.
Can I add one more thing?
Please.
I think this is an optimistic note, because I'm not I'm not despairing over here. I'm actually always optimistic, because I do think that clearly God is at work all the time in the world, in the hearts of men. Truth does win out. We know who wins in the end, ultimately, right? But something that C.S. Lewis pointed to is like Christians get to actually have a reasonable and optimistic approach to the pluralism conversation, because unlike atheists, like if you're an atheist, you don't have many options when you're dealing with religions of any stripe, right? You have to assert that all of them are 100% false, right? Because none of them can have any truth claim whatsoever.
Right.
As a Christian, we believe in truth with a capital T. We believe in vice, and the reality of evil in the world and the need to fight against it. And we understand that there's also virtue and goodness in the world and the need and the ability to fight for it. So for Christians, we get to affirm goodness and truth and beauty wherever we see it. And that's why, we can have conversations with Hindus and
That's right.
Buddhists and Muslims, and we get to come into that with open eyes and open hearts in a certain sense, looking to affirm what is true and good and beautiful.
Yep.
While at the same time, like, not apologizing for the fact that we believe, in the scriptures as revealed by God to be the best foundation for a truly human, truly God-honoring way of life that stewards our own lives well, stewards creation around us well, loves the people around us well, creates a moral order where people are blessed.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, Colson talked about that too. He called it an ecumenicalism of the trenches, right? Let's find these areas of common ground, but at the same time, we can't wimp out, right? And say, well, I'm glad that you're a Hindu. That's good for you. No, it's not, right? It's going to lead to their eternal judgment and death. And we have to remember that. And just like you said, we have to.
Truth matters.
Absolutely.
If you ignore that, it's going to bite you.
Every time.
And it'll bite you in the short term when you look at bad social orders, bad governments. Like, look, no one's a pluralist when it comes to government, right?
That's right. Oh, yeah.
You've got your ideology. This is the way the world needs to be ordered. These are the rules that have to be enforced at the point of a bayonet if necessary, or else everything's going to fall apart.
That's right.
If you're wrong on those major truth claims, it will bite you hard, both in the short term and in the eternal realm.
Excellent. Absolutely. This has been great. Thank you for the time. Again, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate your consistent listening and sharing of the podcast. Help us get the word out. Again, you can go to Stand for Georgia Values, to the Facebook page. The website's coming up, getting some updates and stuff. So don't go there yet, or you'll judge us as a little too harshly. But find us on Facebook, find us on the socials. Keep up. We're excited to get to work here in North Georgia. But thanks for the time, and hopefully we'll talk to everybody in about 2 weeks. Thanks, Spencer.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brice.